Delighted to have Jen Elkow here with us. Jen's been a supporter of ProductTank since the very early days. And Jen is a senior product manager with Skedulo and has spent over 10 years helping teams to ship their products and make them a little bit better at release. So let's welcome Jen.
So hi everyone, I'm Jen Elkow, and really I wanted to start first, I guess, by explaining how I got into product management. And you'll see I'm going to be talking about things I wish I'd learned earlier. When I was thinking through, Product Management 101, that's quite broad. And so, we talked about everyone sort of gets into product management in different ways. And that's actually quite surprising for some people when they first get into it. So personally, I started with project management and business analyst work. On the project management side, what I loved about it, which is somewhat ironic now that I'm in product management, is that there was actually an end. So I loved getting into a project. It was big, hairy, kind of, here's a date, ship it, and then I get to send it off to someone else and never see that again to go on to the next one. And then on the business analyst side, it was really trying to understand the questions that you're asking for the problems. And so the two of those combined, I sort of started getting more excited about the business side, and eventually, I think similar to many people here that I've talked to before, they just sort of ended up in product management. Their company said, hey, we think you're a product manager now. So what do you think about that? Sure. And then you start to sort of work out, okay, well, what does that actually mean? And so for me, I'm quite excited by the idea of product management. As I mentioned, that nothing is really ever done, just hopefully a little less shitty with every release that you send out. And is the customer actually better off? One of the first projects that I came into, I kind of laughed because as a product manager in that same company, it came back to me and I joked with the developer saying I sent it off as this beautiful, pristine little kid. Then it came back to me this dirty, rotten mongrel, and eventually had to sunset it. Yeah, so I'm going to go through talking about some of the lessons that surprised me when I was first getting into product management. There's a lot of talk, and I had a great overview of sort of what product management is, and sort of I'm going to take that sort of to the next step and what I sort of was surprised by and how I actually discovered that. And looking at, what is product management and how do you explain it to someone when they ask you, and no, it's not project management, I'm a product manager. And what is it like doing product management, specifically across different companies? And then how do you get in and move up or around? And then my favorite lesson that was a tough lesson, and I think many of you potentially that are experienced in product management have had to learn yourself, is just let it go. So when I started looking at what's product management, I sort of think about the idea of the elevator pitch. When I first got into it, people were like, oh, you're a product manager, what is that? And I really floundered in actually answering that question. I think in part it's because I didn't quite understand it very well. And when I looked in Google, there actually isn't, like you say, define product manager. There's nothing that comes up. And if you go into the Wikipedia page, there's a lot of warnings as to how it's insufficient. So clearly, there's not great answers out there. But, where I got to is really, as mentioned earlier, is understanding, repeatedly asking yourself, what is this for and who is it for? And it was through asking those questions that I started to get clarity on the problems that I'm actually starting to solve. And the solution that you're coming up with is only going to be as good as the problem that you bring to the team. And when I reframed that thought and not focusing on the solution, focusing on the problem, I really started to get a lot more traction with things. Where I first saw that for myself was at Intercom's blog post, great product managers don't spend time on solutions. And once I came to that realization, I understand the problems that we're actually trying to solve, I then was trying to communicate with the company and, hey, we need to look at these things, and we should look at this, or look at that. And they kind of agreed, maybe, sort of, often didn't, ignored it. And it was quite frustrating, and I was sort of banging my head against the wall at a big company, trying to convince them of things that we should look at. And what I sort of came to the realization with this one was that, in some cases, because I was with this particular company for a while, after a couple of years, then they'd want to look at that thing, and we only had now a month to actually solve the problem, which was frustrating. But I started thinking, okay, clearly this is the right problem to be solving. How am I communicating this? And how can I change how I communicate it so people understand the problem quicker? And how can I tell my story better? And from this, it was Simon Sinek's TED Talk, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And he talks about the golden circle and, focus on why. And he talks about, big purpose why, but I started applying that to every individual interaction, and I found tremendous success when I started doing that. So, it's even saying, so that we can, whatever, insert the benefit that you're looking for, what if we tried this? And even in emails or, in invites, if you start with that, people all of a sudden were, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, even though it was exactly the same thing that I'd said earlier. But now they have the buy-in. And I think in part it might have been because if I said the behavior that they were looking for first, there's immediate barriers. And we shouldn't do that, and they start putting their own context on things. And so once I understood that, I did end up with a much better sort of elevator pitch to explain what is product management. And now I say that product management is looking at what are we doing and why are we doing it. And I work with other teams in technology to say, how are we going to do it in design, how are we going to do it? And then with project management to say, when are we doing it? So what's it like doing product management across the board? Again, this one I found when I was going to my second company looking at other product management. I was nervous because at this point I actually needed to interview for a specific product manager position. I wasn't just told, you're a product manager now. And so I did what most product people do, you start researching. And I got into the book, Cracking the PM Interview. And while the questions in there, I've never actually, personally, I don't know if anyone else has noticed something different. I've never actually been asked those style of questions here in Brisbane. But I have to say, what the book gave me was an understanding of how these different companies work and how product management is quite different across the board in those different companies. And for example, if you're looking at a mature product, well, you can have more reach potentially because they already have an established customer base. And but then on the flip side of that, some of the tensions you'll have potentially, as I experienced here, was the internal processes. And if you're, potentially the first product manager in there, well, you might be convincing them of what product management is and trying to take some of the stuff that they used to do because there wasn't a product manager, and now you're looking at that. And there's some interesting tensions involved in those larger organizations like that. And you sort of compare that to a startup where there's plenty of opportunities. It's sort of opportunities abound. Whatever you can get, you will be able to work on. Some of the challenges on that side, though, is often, or at least what I found, was that they're often drowning in different ideas. They're not necessarily starved for ideas, they're drowning in ideas. And so some of the biggest challenges is how do you provide focus? And how do you work with founders that have typically done the product management role before, and now you're trying to work with them and carrying that forward. So once I understood what it was I was looking for, those are actually the questions that I started crafting. I certainly wouldn't recommend that you ask all of those questions in one go, but I talked to as many different people as I could and got all the different answers so I could actually start to understand what is that company like, and do I want to be there? Because it's not inherently good or bad with these different situations. It's understanding what is it going to be like and what am I going to be bringing to that particular organization. And one of the things here as well is I wanted to get concrete answers from things. And so I reframed any of those why questions and I would ask what. So I'd get specific answers from people. Because I found if you were asking why do you do something, they start to think they have to find some big answer for that. And that particular sort of, golden nugget, I got that from the Coaching Habit book. So, if you're interested in product management, how do you get into it? How do you move around in product management? And one of the first things that I was also caught against was imposter syndrome. And it is very rampant in product management, I think in part because product management can cover so many different aspects of things. You know, there's the business, technology, design, UX, and then even more. I'm not even going to describe all of the different areas. But you can see as you start to look at these positions, maybe I'm not tech focused enough, and maybe I'm not design focused enough. But someone said to me, you know, what if you reframed that? And instead of talking about, you know, what I'm lacking, all of those individual experiences are actually what creates sort of your superpower. And so what is your individual superpower that you're bringing to an organization? And how can you better craft that story when you then go to actually look at these different interviews? And rather quickly, I guess, just getting in, one of the main things that I hear often is you can actually start wherever you're at. And you can start to look at, you know, defining the problem better. Don't just come with a solution to the product team if you're not in product yet and you're interested. Actually try to help cultivate that problem understanding and try and make sure you work towards that purpose when you're working on things. And they can likely start to help sort of cultivate you and see if they can help bring you along within the company. And then as well, when you're moving around, the similarities in product management between industries also surprised me quite a bit. I thought when I first moved to other industries, I mean, actually show of hands, how many of you have done product management across industries? And how many of you would say that there's more similarities than differences in those roles? Yeah. So that really surprised me when I first moved, because I was quite scared about actually applying for things in different areas. So I guess don't be scared. Certainly you need to understand the industry. You get a lot of language and credibility when you have that industry knowledge, but certainly that doesn't necessarily have to be a hindrance to the product management experience itself. And as I mentioned as well, you know, if you're moving up, just understand your own unique perspective that you're bringing. So I guess, you know, once you're in product management as well, it's often quite easy for you to take on things and feel that you have to actually solve every problem that you're seeing. But if you do that, you will likely burn out. And I know so many product managers, when I asked a couple different product managers, you know, what's something that you wish you had known earlier? And most of them made some reference to the fact that, you know, when they first got in, they wanted to prove their value and prove their worth. And so they went out and they tried to talk to everybody and get every problem that they could and try and solve it and be the actual hero of, you know, the whole team. But that doesn't work long term. And one of the things that we've got around at Skedulo right now is, you know, we're looking at scaling soon, is the idea that superheroes don't scale, which I love that phrase. And, you know, you may need superhero efforts to get to where you are right now, but that doesn't last long term. So yeah, those are the things I wish I had known and applied earlier. So focus on the problem, what is it for, who is it for, understanding and communicating by starting with why, looking at how business types actually impacts the product management work that you're doing, clarity and understanding what a company is like, reframing that imposter syndrome, and then let it go.